Okay, so let's start about ASP.NET introduction first. What is ASP.NET and what is the use of this? See, in computer world, we see most of the time two types of applications. If we talk about application developer, one is Windows application and one is web applications. Windows applications are the applications where we create the desktop applications with the WinForms like MS Word, MS Excel. These are our Windows applications. Whereas the websites like yahoo.com, gmail.com, or the websites which we can see through the web browser like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, these are the web-based applications. Now if we talk about .NET, with the .NET we can create web application using ASP.NET. There is other way also now these days, like with MVC also we can create the web applications. When we talk about web application in any language, they runs on HTTP protocols. So what is protocol? Protocol is the way of communications between two systems, two or more systems. So in ASP.NET, when we create the application, that application we can run it on the web browsers. And the web browser is the medium by which a client can communicate with the server. ASP.NET applications are the server-side applications, as well as we can create with this framework the client-side application. So let us understand what is the client-side applications and what is the server-side applications. Say an example, we are the user and I want to open a web page, say yahoo.com or gmail.com. So when we write that URL into our web browser and we press enter, or we press on the button which basically goes and open the website. So what is happening at that time when we do the request, at that time our request goes to the server. The server where is the website exists or runs. So the server where my website is hosted, that is called a web server. So yahoo.com, gmail.com, or the other .com websites which we can access through our browser. These websites are hosted somewhere on web server. And the one who is using that website, like I am a user who is clicking on the web browser to open the website, so I'm a client. So there is a client and server communication is happening. So for an example, you have a username and password that you need to enter, and there is a submit button. There is a validation which is on your text box where you are entering username or password, that it should not be empty. So you must have to provide the user ID and password. But by keeping it blank, you are clicking on the submit button. Immediately it says, no, you have to enter the user ID and password. Once you enter the user ID and password for checking your credential, it checks that whether that user ID and password is valid or not. If it is valid, then it gives the detail of your user ID and password in the that details. It brings the details and open your email email details for that, right? So when these things are checking that your user ID and password should not be blank, at that time my browser is not requesting to the server. It is not going to the web server. It is all the things are checking on the client side, on my browser side or on my system. So if a programming where the request does not go to the server for processing, these type of programming is called client-side programming. So JavaScript, VBScript, and there are other frameworks are also developed now, which we can say jQuery, AngularJS. So those who are using JavaScript as a base are called the client-side programming, where we are not interacting with the web server. But these frameworks like jQuery, we can also develop the server-side programming. We can access the data. We can go to the database server. So, but somehow these are made for the client-side programming. So on the client side, you are validating that user ID and password is not empty. There is a benefit of that because when you send a request from your system to a web server, it takes time. So that time will be saved. There is no need to send the request for checking user ID and password empty box for the web server. So that can be handled by the client-side programming. But when you are entering the user ID and password, at that time when you click with submit button, it goes to the server, and from server it gives you the details. So at that time I need something to be processed by the web server, and brings back the result. For that I need a server-side script. By using ASP.NET, we can create server-side script as well as we can incorporate client-side script. Means we can use JavaScript and for the client-side script, and .NET itself framework use the server-side script. So you can create the server-side programming as well as the client-side programming. Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. I will add it. Okay. So let us see that how the ASP.NET project we can create. We need to click on the new project. Okay. We'll go to the C# web, under that ASP.NET web application, and we can give a name. So let me create an object, first web, and click on OK. So here it is my empty project. I'm just creating a blank solution, blank project for ASP.NET. So we can start from the scratch. So this is very much similar to our console application, which is having a project references. But the new thing which we can see here is the web.config that we will talk later in our other lectures. Now what I will do in this project, I want to create a web form. So I will right click on it and add new item. So here we need to select web form. We can give any name here. So I'm just keeping web form 1. Now this is on the right hand side, we will see that webform.aspx. So aspx is the extension of the web form. So aspx indicates it's a ASP.NET web page. In ASP.NET we can create a web application which has two parts. One is the design and other is the code behind. So this is the code behind file. In code behind file, what we do the server side scripting. Like here, if you see PageLoad. And same way, for example, I have a command button. I want to click and I want to perform some action on that. So these kind of things we can write it in the code behind file. And as we know that .NET is object oriented, so we will follow the object oriented concept here. So first of all, let us see what is in the ASPX page. In ASPX page, down there you can see 3 buttons: design, split, and source. Design indicates that this is the look and feel. Say an example, if you want in the tool from the toolbox, if you want to drag and drop so if you want to drag and drop a button over here, so this is my command button, and this command button has some property here. So if I say this command button text property, which indicates the text which is written into this, I say click me. So this click me is now come over here as a text. So this is my design, but behind the scene this has some code. So if you click on source, now you can see ASP button ID run at server text click me. So this code we can see in the source, and the output how it will look like we can see in the design. And if you want to work on both, means you want to see side by side, you can see here. The other benefit of source is that you can, if you are familiar with the coding of ASP.NET, how to create, then we can write the code here. For example, I want to add one more button. So I'll say colon button and ID. ID is basically a property which should be unique. Two controls cannot have the same ID. So I'm just giving some different name, button 2. Run at server. This I will explain you after a little bit. And text I want to give another button. So now you can see here that I have two. Now if I click on design, view is out of sync source, click here for synchronized view. So if I click on it, so now you can see I have written here and the code, the design is created here. So this way the split works, means side by side you can see that what is the code for that particular control. But most of the time we either work on the source once we are familiar with the coding or through the design. So that is up to us or up to our comfortability, that how we want to use that. Now I have two buttons. So let me go to source and explain you something from here. On the top we have this percentage, then at the rate, page, language, C# auto. So what is this? This is a directive. So directive indicates that you want to use its features into your page, onto your applications or page level. In this case, page level. So there are a lot of directives are there, but at this time, let me talk about the page directive. Means the application which we are developing, what language it is using, what is the code behind language or file it is. So if you see here, page directive, it says language equals to C#. Means I'm developing this application in C#. It could be VB.NET if we select the different language. Auto event wireup equals to true. What it means? See, we have a code behind language, webform1.aspx. If I go over here, there is a page load event. Page load event indicates that as soon as you run your application, this is the event which execute. There are different events of page also executes before this or after this. But at this moment, if I say when my page is loaded, once my page is loaded on the browser, I want to execute some code. So here, if I say I want to execute this code, response dot write, this is the test page. So response.write will just print on the web browser. And if I run it, so with this F5, either you can press F5 or you can click on this play button. So down you can see ASP.NET Developer Server localhost 54681. So this is basically our web server localhost. So now this page is getting executed. Okay, so you can see that whatever I have written in the page load, that is printed here. This is the test page. Now, if I go back here into my web form 1.aspx and let me put it as a false. So auto event wire up, what it does, it wire ups the events to the page. Means, for example, load is an event which is wired up with the page. So if I run it again, I just made the changes that auto event wire up equals to false. Now you can see that that test message is not displayed, whereas in this means when it was auto event wire up equals to true, it displayed, but when I made it false, it did not display. So it means this page load event is not fired. So that is the purpose of auto event wire up, which set true so that my page level events should get fired. Code behind. Code behind is the file where you write the code. So as you have seen, I have written that code into the webform.aspx.cs. CS indicates the C# file. If it is VB, then it will be vb.vb file. If you remember that in the C# tutorials we have seen there is a namespace, there is a class, and this is the inheritance. Means this application is available in namespace first ASP app, and it has the class webform1, which is getting inherited from the page class. So page is a class for, and webform is also a class which is getting inherited from it. So if I go back to my source again, here what I said that code behind file is webform1.aspx, and it is getting inherited from first apps.webform. So first apps.webform is this one. So that is all about that page directive, how it works. Now, as I told that you can create two types of applications in the ASP.NET. One is server side and one is the client side. So when we are creating a client side application, we use the JavaScript. And JavaScript we can use with the tag script type equals to, and we can say JavaScript. There are other scripts you can write for the client, but we will use JavaScript only. So in this script tag, we can write our JavaScript methods, and that we can call on the click or other events of the controls. Same way, if we see here, let me remove this. If we go to the toolbox, there are different categories: standard, data, validations, navigations. These all are ASP.NET controls. But down here, if you see, there is an HTML controls. So the controls which you want to use, whether you want to use the server side controls or the client side control. So what is the difference between server side controls and client side control is that whenever you use a server side control, it has a property called runAt. So say an example, if I drag and drop this button, run at server, it means whenever you are using a control which has run at server, it means for that it will go to the server's web server and come back. So there will be a post back happens. There is a round trip happen from client to server. ASP controls or ASP.NET controls are started with the ASP tag. So if you see here colon ASP colon button, so this is a ASP button which is a server side and that is must. You should have a ID of that. So these two properties are must, ID and run at server. This text is optional if you want to print some label on that button. If you want or not, that is optional, but these two things are mandatory. Same way, if I drag and drop input button from the HTML, so this is also button. When I drag and dropped it, it does not have a property run at server. So if I write a click event on ASP button and click event on button 2, ASP button, when I click, it will go to the web server and do whatever the code we have written. But when I write a click event of button 2, in that case, because it's a HTML button, it does not have a property run at server. So it will not execute the code on the server side. It works on the only on the client side. Server side code we can use in our CodeBehind. So if I go to my CodeBehind and if I say button 1, so we can see button 1, but button 2 is not visible. So here we can use only the server side. If I say server side, but I cannot access this button 2. The reason is because it's not a server side button. Now to convert a HTML control, if if we want to convert a HTML control to a server side control, what we need to write? We need to write run at server. That property we need to set. So if I make input button 2 as a server side, then we can make it server side. Okay, we just need to write the run at server. So let's go to the CodeBehind now. So now you can see button 2 is also available, right? So mean to say you can create HTML control, you can create server side controls. So how do you differentiate? With the help of run at server. So you can convert an HTML control to a server side control by using this property. When we when we run our ASP.NET application, it needs a web server. We use IIS web server. So where our application runs. So let me open that IIS. In the run, you can write inet mgr. Okay, so if this comes, it means my IIS is not installed on this server. So we can install using control panel. Let me install it. Okay, so I have installed this IIS. So now again, if I put inet mgr, so this is the server where we can host our applications. So here if you see, there so many things are there, sites where we can host our website. Default website is the one under which we create the websites. So I'm not going in detail about this IIS as of now, but this is the place where you are going to host your application. And if you notice that when I run my application, so here if you see that I have localhost colon 54681 and my web page name. So localhost is the host where our application is hosted. Localhost basically indicates your local system host, in this case IAS. Prior to .NET Framework 2.0, it was mandatory that you have to have the IAS installed on your system. Then you can run your ASP.NET application. But 2.0 onwards, with the .NET Framework, there is a web server component is available. So with that component, what we can do, if the IAS is not installed on my system, I can run my application, ASP.NET application. So that web server is inbuilt in the .NET framework. So for that, even though if you have seen that I was not having IAS installed on my system, but I was able to run this application. And this one 54681, that is not a constant. It can be changed application or system to system, application to application. This is called the port number. So port number is used when our communication happen. For example, when I run my application, I'm saying okay, it will run on this particular port. In HTTP, by default the port is 80. So with this way, this is where my webform1.aspx, which is the name of my web page, is hosted.